In the autumn of 1783, the guns of the American Revolutionary War finally fell silent. What began 8 years earlier as a colonial uprising against British authority, had transformed into a global conflict that drew in great empires and tested the ideals of freedom, sovereignty, and diplomacy. The Treaty of Paris of 1783 was not merely an agreement between two powers. It was the formal recognition of a new nation, the United States of America, and the beginning of a new chapter in world history. But the road to that treaty was long, uncertain, and fraught with peril. Behind the signatures on parchment lay years of bloodshed, diplomacy, betrayal, and determination. This is the story of how the Treaty of Paris came to be. By the late 1770s, the American Revolutionary War had raged for years. Battles had been fought across 13 colonies, from the frozen banks of the Hudson River to the burning fields of the South. The Declaration of Independence had been proclaimed in 1776. But independence was not yet won. Great Britain, the world's mightiest empire, had no intention of letting its colonies slip away without a fight. Armies clashed, cities burned, and lives were shattered. Yet even as the war dragged on, both sides knew that the end would not come solely on the battlefield. It would come across the negotiating table. For the United States, survival depended on alliances. France, driven by rivalry with Britain and the hope of weakening its old enemy, entered the war in 1778. Spain followed soon after, and the Dutch Republic too would be drawn into the global struggle. Suddenly, the American Revolution was not just a colonial rebellion, it was a world war. The seas boiled with naval battles. In the Caribbean, in India, and on the coast of Africa. Conflict spread far beyond North America. Every European power had something to gain. Or something to lose. And so, diplomacy became just as crucial as muskets and cannons. The year 1781 marked the beginning of the end. At Yorktown, Virginia, the combined forces of George Washington's Continental Army and the French army under Rochambeau, supported by Admiral de Grasse's fleet, surrounded British General Cornwallis. The British surrendered. The victory at Yorktown stunned the world. Though the war did not end immediately, it shattered British resolve. In London, Parliament debated the futility of continuing the fight. The cost was immense, the empire stretched thin, and public opinion weary. In America, hope soared. Perhaps, at last, independence could truly be achieved. As cannons cooled, diplomats prepared to write history. Representing the United States were men of extraordinary character. Benjamin Franklin, the elder statesman, adored in Paris for his wit and wisdom. John Adams, fiery and unyielding, defender of independence. John Jay, sharp, cautious, and determined to secure American interests. On the British side stood Richard Oswald, a wealthy merchant entrusted with the delicate mission of securing peace. Behind him, ministers in London. Divided, cautious, and desperate to salvage something from defeat. And hovering always in the background were France and Spain, allies of America, but also powers with their own ambitions. The negotiations would be long, secretive, and treacherous. Paris became the center of intrigue. In the grand salons and quiet chambers, letters were exchanged, drafts were debated, and tempers flared. Franklin charmed, Adams argued, and Jay maneuvered. France, led by Foreign Minister Vergennes, sought to mediate, but also to restrain America's expansion. Spain demanded territory, particularly Gibraltar, while Britain tried to divide its enemies. For the Americans, one issue mattered above all: recognition. Would Great Britain, after years of war, finally acknowledge the independence of the United States? The answer was not easily given. The American diplomats soon realized a harsh truth. Though allies in war, their European partners had interests that did not always align with their own. France feared a rising America might one day threaten its Caribbean empire. Spain, too, resisted the idea of America expanding westward toward the Mississippi River. John Jay, suspicious of French intentions, made a bold move. He opened direct, secret talks with the British. Without informing France. It was a dangerous gamble, but one that would shape the treaty. By 1782, preliminary agreements began to take form. The British, recognizing the futility of further war, agreed to America's independence. But other questions remained. Where would the borders lie? What of debts owed to British merchants? What of loyalists who had supported the Crown during the war? Line by line, clause by clause, the treaty began to take shape. The United States would stretch from the Atlantic Ocean to the Mississippi River. Its northern boundary would touch Canada, and its southern boundary reach Spanish Florida. Fishing rights were granted to Americans off the coast of Newfoundland. Debts were to be honored, property restored where possible. And Britain, though reluctant, would at last treat America as a sovereign nation. On September 3, 1783, in the Hôtel d'Urque in Paris, the Treaty of Paris was signed. Benjamin Franklin, John Adams, and John Jay placed their signatures alongside that of David Hartley, representing Great Britain. The war that had begun with musket fire at Lexington and Concord, ended with the stroke of a pen. The American Revolution was over. Independence was secure. The Treaty of Paris contained several key provisions. Great Britain acknowledged the United States of America as free, sovereign, and independent. The United States gained vast territory, from the Atlantic coast to the Mississippi River. Americans received rights to fish in the rich waters off Newfoundland and the Gulf of St. Lawrence. Both nations agreed creditors would face no lawful obstacles in recovering debts. Loyalist property was to be restored, though in practice, much was not. Both sides agreed to release prisoners. These terms reshaped not just America, but the entire balance of power in the Atlantic world. When news of the treaty reached America, celebrations erupted. In cities and towns, bells rang and bonfires blazed. But joy was tempered with challenges. The nation was free, yes, but fragile. 13 states, loosely bound under the Articles of Confederation, faced economic hardship, political division, and an uncertain future. Yet for the moment, the treaty gave what generations of colonists had dreamed of, the chance to govern themselves. In Britain, the treaty was met with bitterness. The empire had lost its most prized colonies. Public debate raged. Was it betrayal? Mismanagement? Inevitability? Yet some saw opportunity. Trade with America could continue. And Britain still held Canada, the Caribbean, and vast territories elsewhere. The empire was wounded, but not broken. The Treaty of Paris echoed across the world. For France, it was a moment of triumph, yet also financial strain that would soon fuel its own revolution. For Spain, it meant gains in Florida, but disappointment in Gibraltar. For the Netherlands, weakened by war, it marked decline. And for America, it was only the beginning. The Treaty of Paris of 1783 stands as one of the most significant diplomatic achievements in history. It was the birth certificate of a nation. It showed that ideals of liberty could triumph against empire. That negotiation, as much as battle, could shape the destiny of peoples. It was a treaty signed in ink, but written in the blood and sacrifice of countless men and women. Today, centuries later, the Treaty of Paris remains a cornerstone of American identity. It was more than an end to war. It was the beginning of a nation's story. From the quiet rooms of Paris emerged a new world power. Fragile, imperfect, but free. And though history has carried America far from those early days, the memory of 1783 remains. A reminder that peace, hard won, can shape the course of history as surely as war.